The October evening air in Amarillo, Texas, carried the smell of mesquite smoke and grilled steaks as Marcus Webb pulled his beat-up 1998 Ford pickup into the driveway of the Triple Creek Ranch. At 62 years old, Marcus had the weathered face of a man who'd spent his entire life working outdoors. Deep wrinkles framed his gray-blue eyes, and his hands were gnarled from decades of ranch work. He'd been a rodeo cowboy in his youth, then a ranch manager for 30 years, until a back injury 2 years ago had forced him into early retirement. Now he lived alone in a small trailer on 5 acres of scrubland he'd inherited from his late brother, surviving on disability checks that barely covered his medications. Every Saturday night for the past 15 years, Marcus and 5 other former ranch hands gathered at Vernon Briggs's place for poker, cheap beer, and the kind of trash talk that only old friends could get away with. Tonight felt different, though. Marcus had exactly $12 in his wallet, and he knew the guys had been whispering about how far he'd fallen since his injury. Vernon's ranch sprawled across 200 acres of prime Texas land. The main house was modest but well-maintained, with a wide porch where the poker table was already set up under strings of warm lights. 4 men were already seated. Vernon himself, a barrel-chested man of 65 with a salt and pepper beard. Ray Hutchins, 60, thin as a rail with a perpetual cigarette dangling from his lips. Tommy Chen, 58, whose family had owned the neighboring ranch for 3 generations, and Dale Patterson, 63, who'd made a small fortune breeding championship cutting horses. Well, look who finally showed up, Vernon called out as Marcus climbed the porch steps, his bad back making him move slower than he liked. We were starting to think you'd forgotten about us, Marcus. Or maybe you finally realized you can't afford to play with the big boys anymore. The comment stung because it was true. Marcus took his usual seat, the wooden chair creaking under his weight. I got enough for a few hands, Marcus said quietly, pulling out his $12. Ray snorted. $12? Hell, Marcus, that won't even cover the ante for more than a few rounds. Maybe you should just sit this one out. Watch the rest of us play. I'm fine, Marcus insisted, his jaw tightening. As they dealt the first hand, Marcus noticed movement near the far corral. In the fading twilight, he could make out a bull standing alone, separated from Vernon's prized breeding stock. The animal was a pitiful sight, underweight, with a patchy gray-brown coat. His right horn had been broken off halfway, giving him a lopsided appearance, and even from this distance, Marcus could see the limp in his front left leg. What's the story with that bull over there? Marcus asked, nodding toward the isolated animal. Vernon followed his gaze and grimaced. Oh, that piece of garbage! That's Dusty. Bought him 6 months ago from a ranch liquidation. Thought I could fix him up and flip him for profit. Turned out he's got a bum leg that won't heal, one eye's half blind from a cataract, and he's got the temperament of a rattlesnake when you try to work him. Vet says he's not fit for breeding, not suitable for rodeo work, and barely worth his weight in meat. I've been trying to get rid of him for months. Why don't you just send him to slaughter? Tommy asked, arranging his cards. Tried that. Even the slaughterhouse said they'd only take him if I paid for transport, and that'd cost me more than I'd get back. So he just sits there, eating my hay and taking up space. Biggest waste of money I've ever made. Marcus couldn't take his eyes off the bull. Dusty stood with his head lowered, completely isolated from the other animals, looking utterly defeated. Something about that image resonated deep in Marcus's chest. 2 broken-down creatures that the world had decided were no longer useful. I'll take him, Marcus heard himself say. The poker table went silent. 5 faces turned to stare at him like he'd just spoken in a foreign language. What? Vernon said finally. I said I'll take that bull off your hands. Ray burst out laughing, slapping the table so hard the poker chips jumped. Oh man, Marcus has finally lost it. You can't even afford a decent hand of poker, and you want to take on a worthless bull? How much you want for him? Marcus asked Vernon, ignoring Ray's laughter. Vernon leaned back in his chair, studying Marcus with a mixture of amusement and concern. Marcus, that bull is worthless. He's going to cost you in feed, in vet bills if that leg gets worse, in time and effort. Why would you want that headache? How much? Marcus repeated. You really serious about this? Vernon shook his head. Fine, I'll make you a deal. We'll play 1 hand of poker. If you win, you can have Dusty for $1. $1 single. If you lose, you admit you're too washed up to make good decisions anymore, and you stop coming to these poker nights. The cruelty of the offer hung in the air like smoke. The other men shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't friendly ribbing anymore. This was Vernon putting Marcus in his place, making him choose between his pride and a worthless animal. Dale cleared his throat. Vernon, that's a bit harsh, don't you think? Harsh? I'm offering him a bull for $1. That's the deal of the century. Vernon's voice had an edge to it now. What do you say, Marcus? You got the guts to bet everything on one hand? Or are you going to admit that maybe you should have stayed home tonight? Marcus looked at the $12 in front of him, then at the lonely bull in the corral, then at the faces of men he'd called friends for decades. He thought about the past 2 years, sitting alone in his trailer, watching TV shows he didn't care about, feeling useless and forgotten. Deal the cards, Marcus said quietly. Vernon dealt. 5 card draw. Marcus picked up his cards. A pair of 3s, a 7, a jack, and a king. Not good. Not good at all. He discarded everything but the 3s and drew 3 new cards. The first was another 3. The second was a 9. The third was another 3. 4 of a kind. 3s. The lowest 4 of a kind possible, but 4 of a kind nonetheless. Vernon showed his hand with confidence. 2 pairs, aces, and 8s. A strong hand, but not strong enough. The silence that followed was deafening. Well, I'll be damned, Tommy whispered. Ray stopped laughing. Dale actually smiled, and Vernon's face turned the color of an overripe tomato. Marcus pulled out 1 crumpled dollar bill from his wallet, one of the 12 he had to his name, and laid it on the table. I believe Dusty's mine now, he said. 20 minutes later, as Vernon's ranch hands helped load the limping, half-blind bull into a borrowed trailer, Marcus heard the whispers behind him. That old fool just wasted his last dollar on a bull that'll be dead by winter. Somebody should check on him. He's clearly not right in the head anymore. What's he going to feed that thing? His disability check? Marcus ignored them all. He walked up to Dusty, and the bull turned his good eye toward him. For a moment, they just looked at each other. 2 broken-down creatures that the world had decided were worthless. Marcus reached out slowly and touched Dusty's neck. The bull didn't flinch. Under the patchy coat, Marcus could feel the animal's heartbeat, strong and steady despite everything. Well, Dusty, Marcus said quietly, I guess we're both rejects now. Might as well be rejects together. As he drove away from Triple Creek Ranch, Dusty swaying slightly in the trailer behind him, Marcus had no idea that this $1 bet on a broken bull would change not just his life, but the lives of hundreds of people he'd never met. All he knew was that for the first time in 2 years, he had a purpose again. And sometimes that's worth more than all the money in the world. The 5 acres Marcus called home looked even smaller with Dusty standing in the middle of it. The makeshift corral Marcus had built years ago for his brother's horses was barely holding together. Rusted wire fence, weathered wooden posts that leaned at odd angles, and a 3-sided shelter with a roof that leaked in at least 4 places. It wasn't much, but it was all Marcus had to offer. As he guided Dusty off the trailer, the bull limped slowly into the corral, his good eye scanning the unfamiliar territory. Marcus watched him for a long moment, suddenly aware of the enormity of what he'd just done. He had $11 left to his name, no feed stored up, and a disabled bull that would need food, water, and probably medical attention he couldn't afford. What the hell were you thinking, Marcus? He muttered to himself. Dusty turned to look at him, and for a moment, Marcus could have sworn he saw understanding in that one good eye. Not judgment, not expectation, just recognition. 2 creatures who'd been cast aside, standing together in the fading Texas twilight. Marcus spent the next hour patching the worst holes in the shelter with scraps of plywood he found behind his trailer. His back screamed with every movement, but he kept working. When darkness finally fell, he poured the last of his horse feed, left over from his brother's time, into a trough. It wasn't much, maybe 3 days' worth if he rationed it carefully. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He sat on his trailer's small porch, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders against the October chill, watching Dusty's silhouette in the moonlight. The bull hadn't eaten yet, just stood there, head lowered, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop, for this to be revealed as another cruel trick. "I know how you feel, buddy," Marcus said softly into the darkness. "Been waiting for the other shoe to drop myself for 2 years now." Around 3 in the morning, Marcus heard movement. He looked up to see Dusty had finally approached the feed trough. The bull ate slowly, carefully, like someone who'd learned not to take anything for granted. When he finished, he looked directly at Marcus's porch, gave a soft snort, and lay down in the shelter. Something loosened in Marcus's chest. It was a small thing, a bull eating dinner, but it felt like a victory. The next morning, reality hit hard. Marcus checked his wallet. $11. His disability check wouldn't come for another 2 weeks. He had half a can of coffee, 3 eggs, and a quarter loaf of bread in his trailer. The feed was nearly gone, and Dusty would need at least 20 pounds of hay daily, plus grain supplements if Marcus had any hope of getting some weight back on him. He was calculating impossible math in his head when he heard a truck pull up. Tommy Chen climbed out, carrying 2 large bales of hay in the back of his pickup. "Morning, Marcus," Tommy said, not quite meeting his eyes. "Thought you might need these. Consider it a loan. You can pay me back whenever." Marcus's throat tightened. "Tommy, I can't." "Yes, you can, and you will." Tommy dropped the tailgate and started unloading. "Look, what Vernon did last night was wrong. Making that bet, humiliating you like that. Dale and I talked about it after you left. That wasn't right. I won the hand fair and square. That's not the point. The point is he tried to make you look like a fool and somehow you turned it around. That took guts." Tommy finished stacking the hay and turned to face Marcus. "But guts don't feed a bull, so take the hay, take care of that animal, and when you can, you pay me back. Deal?" Marcus extended his hand and they shook. Deal. Over the next week, something unexpected happened. Dale Patterson stopped by with a bag of grain supplements his horses didn't need. Ray Hutchins, the same man who'd laughed at Marcus at the poker table, showed up with a veterinary contact who agreed to examine Dusty for free. Even people Marcus barely knew started appearing. A woman from the local feed store who accidentally delivered an extra order to his address, a retired rancher who helped repair the corral fence, a teenage boy who volunteered to help with daily feeding. The story had spread through Amarillo's tight-knit ranching community, the old cowboy who'd bet his last dollar on a worthless bull. Some told it as a joke, but others heard something different in it, a kind of defiance, a refusal to accept that some lives were disposable. Dusty began to change, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. The good food and regular care started filling out his ribs. His coat, though still patchy, gained a bit more sheen. He still limped, would always limp, but he moved with more confidence. And his temperament, supposedly so difficult, turned out to be nothing more than the wariness of an animal that had been hurt too many times. One evening, 2 weeks after that poker game, Marcus was sitting on his porch when Vernon Briggs's truck pulled up. Vernon got out slowly, looking uncomfortable. "Came to check on the bull," he said gruffly. "He's doing fine. Better than fine, actually." Vernon walked to the corral fence and stared at Dusty for a long time. The bull looked back at him with that one good eye, calm and unbothered. "I was wrong," Vernon said finally. "About him. About you. About a lot of things." He pulled out an envelope and handed it to Marcus. "There's $500 in there. Not charity. Not a loan. Payment for teaching an old fool that value isn't always where we think it is." Marcus started to protest, but Vernon held up his hand. "Take it. Use it for Dusty. And Marcus?" Vernon's voice cracked slightly. "Thank you for reminding me what being a rancher used to mean. Before it was all about profit margins and efficiency, when it was about taking care of things that needed taking care of." As Vernon drove away, Marcus looked at the envelope in his hand, then at Dusty grazing peacefully in the moonlight. The bull that nobody wanted was becoming something else now. Not just an animal, but a symbol of second chances, of refusing to give up on things the world had written off. Marcus didn't know it yet, but that symbol was about to spread far beyond 5 acres in Amarillo, Texas. 3 weeks after Marcus won Dusty in that poker game, a local high school teacher named Jennifer Walsh brought her photography class to interview retired ranchers for a community project. One of her students, a 17-year-old girl named Sophie Martinez, had heard about Marcus and Dusty from her grandfather who worked at the feed store. "There's this old cowboy who bet his last dollar on a broken bull everyone gave up on," Sophie told her teacher. "I think it would make a great story," Jennifer agreed, and they drove out to Marcus's property on a crisp November afternoon. What they found was Marcus brushing Dusty's coat, talking to him softly while the bull stood peacefully, his head resting against Marcus's shoulder. Sophie raised her camera and captured the moment. A weathered old man in worn jeans and a faded flannel shirt, embracing a scarred, one-eyed bull in golden afternoon light. The image was raw, honest, and deeply moving. "Mr. Webb, can you tell us why you bought him?" Sophie asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment, one hand still resting on Dusty's neck. "Because everybody deserves someone who sees their worth when the whole world says they're worthless. Dusty here taught me that I still had something to give, even when I thought I was all used up." Sophie posted the photo and interview on her Instagram that evening with the caption, "This is Dusty, a bull nobody wanted, and Marcus, a cowboy everyone forgot. Together, they're reminding us that worth isn't measured by what's broken, but by what's still beating inside." By morning, the post had 10,000 shares. By that afternoon, 50,000. Within 3 days, it had gone viral, millions of views across every social media platform. News outlets from across Texas picked up the story, then national networks. Good Morning America called. So did the Today Show. Marcus's phone, a cheap flip phone he rarely used, rang constantly. Letters arrived by the dozens. People sent checks, gift cards, feed donations. A veterinary clinic in Dallas offered free lifetime care for Dusty. A saddle company wanted to sponsor them. Hollywood producers called about movie rights. It was overwhelming and terrifying. Marcus had gone from forgotten to famous in 72 hours, and he had no idea how to handle any of it. The turning point came when a letter arrived from a woman in Ohio named Patricia Saunders. She wrote, "My husband was laid off after 30 years at the factory. He's been depressed, feeling worthless. Then he saw your story. He went outside yesterday for the first time in weeks and fixed the fence he'd been putting off. He said if a broken bull could matter again, maybe he could too. Thank you for giving him hope." Marcus read that letter 3 times, his hands shaking. Then he read another from a teenage boy who'd been bullied at school for his disability, and another from an elderly widow who'd felt invisible since her husband died. Dozens of letters, all saying the same thing. Dusty's story had reminded them they still mattered. That evening, Marcus sat on his porch with Dusty grazing nearby, watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in shades of orange and purple. He thought about that poker game, that single dollar, and how one small act of seeing value where others saw waste had rippled outward in ways he never imagined. Vernon stopped by with Dale and Tommy. They sat together in silence for a while before Vernon spoke. "You did something important, Marcus. Something bigger than any of us understood that night." Marcus nodded slowly. "I think Dusty did it. I just showed up." "No," Tommy said firmly. "You both did it. Together. That's what people are responding to. Not a rescue story, a partnership story. 2 rejects refusing to be rejected." As darkness fell and his friends departed, Marcus walked to the corral. Dusty came to the fence immediately, pressing his head against Marcus's chest. "We've got a responsibility now, don't we, boy?" Marcus whispered. "People are watching, hoping. We can't let them down." Dusty snorted softly as if in agreement. The bull nobody wanted had become a symbol of hope. And the story was just beginning. 6 months after that viral photo, Marcus's 5 acres had transformed into something he never imagined. The Second Chance Ranch. With donations that poured in from around the world, Marcus built proper facilities, hired a part-time veterinarian, and most importantly, created a sanctuary for animals nobody else wanted. There was Clementine, a 3-legged horse rescued from a bankrupt circus. Harold, a blind goat that a petting zoo had tried to euthanize. Patches, an elderly donkey with arthritis that a farmer had abandoned. Each animal had a story of rejection, and each found a home alongside Dusty, who had become the unofficial ambassador of the ranch. But Marcus's vision went beyond just saving animals. Inspired by those letters he'd received, he created a volunteer program for people who felt forgotten by society. Veterans struggling with PTSD, elderly folks battling loneliness, teenagers dealing with depression, workers who'd lost their jobs and their sense of purpose. Every Saturday, 30 volunteers came to help care for the animals. They cleaned stalls, repaired fences, and most importantly, they connected with creatures who understood what it felt like to be discarded. James Cortez, a 60-year-old veteran who'd been living in his car, was one of the first volunteers. "I came here thinking I was helping animals," he told a reporter who visited the ranch. "Turns out, they were helping me. When you care for something that needs you, you remember you're still worth something." The ranch didn't just help volunteers. Schools brought troubled students for therapy sessions. Corporations sent burned-out employees for purpose retreats. Nursing homes arranged field trips so their residents could feel useful again by grooming the animals and sharing stories with them. Sophie Martinez, the student who'd taken that first viral photo, volunteered every weekend while attending community college. She documented everything, creating a social media presence that kept Dusty's message alive. Every post showed another life changed, another person who'd found hope in the eyes of an animal that refused to give up. One afternoon, Vernon Briggs arrived with a surprise. Behind his truck was a trailer containing a young bull calf, barely 6 months old, with a twisted front leg. "Found him at a ranch outside San Antonio," Vernon explained, his voice thick with emotion. "Owner was going to put him down. Told him I knew a place where broken things got a second chance." Marcus named the calf Lucky, and within a week, Dusty had taken the young bull under his protection, limping alongside him as if to say, "I know what you're going through, and it's going to be okay." The media loved it. But more importantly, it resonated with millions who saw themselves in these animals, flawed, hurting, but still capable of love and purpose. One evening, as Marcus watched Dusty and Lucky grazing together in the sunset, Jennifer Walsh approached him with tears in her eyes. "My daughter struggled with severe depression," she said quietly. "She tried to take her life twice. But after we visited your ranch last month, something changed. She's been volunteering here every week. Yesterday, she told me that if a $1 bull could matter to the world, maybe she could too. You saved her life, Marcus." Marcus felt his own eyes filling with tears. "Dusty saved her. I just gave him a chance." "No," Jennifer corrected gently. "You both saved her, and thousands of others." That $1 bet became a $1 million lesson about worth, dignity, and never giving up on what others throw away. As darkness fell over Second Chance Ranch, Dusty stood at the fence where Marcus sat. The bull that nobody wanted, the $1 gamble that everyone had laughed at, had become something extraordinary. Not because he'd changed, but because someone had finally seen what was always there. 2 years after that poker game, Marcus Webb stood at the entrance of Second Chance Ranch, watching buses arrive from 3 different states. Today was the ranch's second annual Worth Beyond Measure celebration, a day when people from across the country came to share their stories of finding hope through Dusty's journey. The 5 acres had expanded to 20, purchased with donations and grants. The main barn now held 30 rescued animals. A small visitor center displayed thousands of letters and photos from people whose lives had been touched by a $1 bull. And at the heart of it all, Dusty grazed peacefully in his favorite spot, now surrounded by Lucky and 6 other rescued animals who'd found sanctuary here. Marcus was 74 now, his back even worse than before, but his eyes sparkled with purpose. Beside him stood Sophie Martinez, now 29 and the ranch's full-time director. That photo she'd taken as a high school student hung in museums and had been featured in a Pulitzer Prize-winning documentary about second chances. "Marcus, they're ready for you," Sophie said gently, gesturing toward the main pavilion where 500 people waited. As Marcus walked slowly to the microphone, he passed faces that had become family. James Cortez, the veteran, now ran the volunteer program and had his own apartment. Jennifer Walsh's daughter, Emily, worked as the ranch's therapist, helping others fight the darkness she'd once faced. Vernon Briggs sat in the front row, tears already streaming down his weathered face. 12 years ago, I had $12 to my name and no reason to wake up in the morning. Marcus began, his voice steady despite his emotion. "I was a broken-down old cowboy that the world had forgotten. Then I met a broken-down bull that nobody wanted, and something miraculous happened. Not because either of us became whole, but because we became useful to each other." He paused, looking out at the crowd. Dusty didn't need to be perfect to matter. He just needed someone to see past his broken horn and cloudy eye to the heart that was still beating strong. And that's the lesson he's taught thousands of you. Your worth isn't determined by what's broken, but by what refuses to quit. The applause was thunderous, but Marcus raised his hand for quiet. "Last week I received a letter from a woman in Japan. She'd lost her job, her apartment, and was planning to end her life. Then she saw a video about Dusty. She wrote, 'If a $1 bull could change the world, maybe I still had something to give.' Today she runs a shelter for homeless youth in Tokyo. She named it the Dusty Foundation." He pulled out a stack of letters. "A man in Germany started a program hiring workers over 60 that companies had forced into retirement. A teenager in Brazil created a sanctuary for street dogs. A teacher in India began a school for children with disabilities that other schools rejected. All of them said the same thing. Dusty showed them that being unwanted by some doesn't mean being unworthy to all." Marcus's voice cracked. "That poker game, that $1 bet, people thought I was crazy. Maybe I was, but sometimes the craziest thing you can do is believe in something when everyone else has given up on it. And sometimes that crazy belief changes everything." As if on cue, Dusty walked slowly toward the pavilion, Lucky trailing behind him. The crowd fell silent. The old bull, now gray around his muzzle, his limp more pronounced but his spirit unbroken, walked straight to Marcus and rested his head against the old cowboy's chest. "This is Dusty," Marcus said, his hand on the bull's neck. "He's 12 years old now. He's still got one cloudy eye, still limps on that front leg, still has a broken horn. He's not perfect, but he's proof that perfect isn't the point. Living with purpose is, loving despite the pain is, refusing to be defined by what you lack is." Vernon Briggs stood up, followed by everyone in the pavilion. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. People weren't just applauding Marcus or Dusty. They were applauding the hope that two broken beings had given the world. That evening, as the sun set over Second Chance Ranch, Marcus sat on his porch with Dusty lying nearby. Sophie brought him coffee and sat beside him. "You know what the best part is?" Marcus said quietly. "I bought Dusty for $1 because I thought nobody wanted him. Turns out the whole world wanted him. They just didn't know it yet. They were waiting for someone to show them it was okay to be broken and still be beautiful." Dusty raised his head and looked at Marcus with that one good eye, the same way he had 12 years ago in Vernon's corral. Two rejects who'd refused to accept rejection. Two discarded souls who'd built something magnificent from nothing but belief and stubbornness. Marcus raised his coffee cup in a toast. "Two $1 bets that pay off in ways money can't measure." Dusty snorted softly as if saying, "Amen." And somewhere out there in Japan and Germany and Brazil and India and 1,000 other places, people who'd felt worthless were finding their worth again, all because an old cowboy bet his last dollar on a bull nobody wanted.